G'day, mate. 40 here. I'm really enjoying this undercover clandestine little thing that we've got going on here. It's like an adulterous affair because it's only here in the secret netherworld of the internet that we can truly be ourselves. Like out there in the world, we're living a lie, right? Out there where we are seen in the wider world, we can't be as honest and truthful as we are in here. But what we got going on out there in here, it's special, all right? We can finally be our authentic selves. We no longer have to live a lie. Sure. All right? We no longer have to pretend. We no longer have to, try to please other people. This is a place where we can be ourselves, where we are welcomed and loved unconditionally. Like, this is a free speech platform. This is a place of radical love and inclusion. And we no longer have to play dress up. We no longer have to put on our game face. We no longer have to be polite. This is Hamish. This is friendly. Look how I've let down my hair. I come in here and I just let down my hair. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to live a lie. I don't have to hold back on what I'm thinking. I can share with you what I'm feeling. You can share with me what you're feeling. And there's just radical love, inclusion. It's just wonderful what we've got going on here. And it reminds me, of course, about a Chekhov short story, The Lady with a Lapdog. Okay, Lady with Lapdog. So its hero, Gurov, is a cynical and bitter womanizer, just like how I used to be. And he was married to a woman he secretly detests, and he's contemptuous of all other women. So I struggled with a little misogyny. There have been times in my life when I've had some negative feelings towards women in general. And then during a summer vacation in Yalta, he drifts into yet another affair with a pretty and innocent young woman who is also unhappily married. Now, as the vacation ends, Gurov sees the woman off at the train station, says goodbye to her forever, he thinks, and he returns to Moscow. Now, he resumes his life of joyless work and dissipation, right? So think about your life outside of the 40 show. I mean, it's a life, we can be honest here, it's probably a life of lots of joyless work and dissipation. But here on the 40 show, boom, you can finally come alive. All those little secrets that you try to keep repressed during your workaday world, well, on the 40 show, you can let them loose. We no longer have to live a lie. We can be who we authentically are on the 40 show. So outside the show, you probably got a life like Gurov of just joyless work and dissipation. But gradually, Gurov finds to his surprise that unlike the other women he's amused himself with, like unlike those other shows that you've amused yourself with, this show and this woman is not faded from memory, but has become an ever stronger and more vivid presence for him. He cannot get this woman out of his mind. So finally, in December, he gets on a train and he goes to look for her in the small provincial town where she lives with her weakling of a husband. And he finds her and he learns that she too has been longing for him. So you've been longing for me. I've been longing for you. Thank God we finally found each other and we can be open and we can be honest and accepting. Glory, hallelujah. So the story ends a few months later in a hotel room in Moscow where she comes every few months telling her husband she is seeing a specialist. So I wonder if this is the basis of that TV movie Same Time Next Year where these two people, both married, meet up every year and carry on a clandestine affair. Remember that movie circa, 1980? So on the way, so this woman comes to Moscow every few months to meet Gurov, and she tells her husband that she is seeing a specialist, right? Women have no end of psychological and physical and plumbing issues. They always need to see a specialist. Now, on the way to the hotel to have this assignation, Gurov reflects on the double life he is leading, right? Do you ever reflect on the double life that you are leading outside of this show? And he ponders the paradox that everything that was important, interesting, essential, everything about which he was sincere and did not deceive himself, everything that made up the quintessence of his life went on in secret, while everything that was a lie, everything that was merely the husk in which he hid himself to conceal the truth, like his work at the bank, for instance, his discussions at the club, his ideas of the lower breed, his going to anniversary functions with his wife, all that happened in the sight of all. Is that not the greatest metaphor for what we've got going on here? So luckily for us, it's not same time next year. It's basically same time next day. I don't know about you, but for me, everything that is important, everything that is interesting, everything that is essential, everything about which I am sincere, everything about which I do not deceive myself, everything that makes up the quintessence of my life, that goes on in the secret of this show. While everything that was a lie, everything that's merely the husk in which I hide myself to conceal the truth, all my work at the bank, for example, all my discussions at the club, all my ideas about lower breeds and higher breeds, okay? All these going to anniversary functions, all that happened in the sight of all. So out there in the sight of all, I'm leading all these lies. It's just a husk in which I hide myself to conceal the truth. But it's only when I get together with you that everything that is important, that is interesting, that is essential, everything about which I am sincere, everything about which I do not deceive myself, everything that makes up the quintessence of my life, I get to share that with you right here, right now, in this warm, loving community of just endlessly escalating radical love and inclusion. I mean, it looks like just the forms here. I'm saying words, you're saying words. But what's really going on here is that we check in each day with each other just to check in on the quality of our relationship. Like, do you really care about me? Do I really care about you? Now, we might be arguing about COVID death tolls. We might be arguing about different average IQ levels among different peoples. We might be arguing about Joe Biden or Donald Trump. But really, what's going on here is that we're just checking in with each other to see if each other still cares. We're just checking in here on the quality of our relationship. All right? So everything else is just the husk in which we hide our true selves. But here, we let down our hair. We take off our big black hats. We tie our payas behind our ears. And we live in truth. And we live in love. Will somebody say amen? Can I get an amen, brother? So during the bleakly tender meeting in the hotel room, Gurov catches sight of himself in the mirror. He realized that it was only now. All right, these could be my sentiments as I see myself reflected back on the YouTube replay. I realize it's only now, just as my hair is beginning to turn gray, that I have fallen in love properly, in good earnest, for the first time in my life. And then here's the unforgettable passage. He and Anna Sergeyevna loved each other as people who are very near and dear, as man and wife or close friends love each other. They could not help feeling that fate itself had intended them for one another. Don't you feel that way about this show? I mean, 40 and Laponius and Robert and Glib Medley and Elliot Blatt and Duvid. I mean, fate has meant for us to come together. Woody versus Mia Farrow, who is closer to the truth? I would go with Woody Allen. But that's just the form. The form is we're talking about Woody Allen. But what's truly going on here is that I'm checking in with my longtime friend Robert, and I'm finding out, Robert, do you still care about me? Because I still care about you, bro. And good old Glib Medley, he's just going to suck it up, and he's going to stay here, and he's going to heal. Like, let the healing begin. All right? So he and Anna Sergeyevna loved each other, just like Laponius and myself. We've loved each other as people who are very near and dear, as man and wife. Well, we're not like man and wife, but as close friends love each other. They could not help feeling that fate itself had intended them for one another. I mean, every day I see Laponius in the chat, and I feel like fate has intended us for one another. And they were unable to understand why he should have a wife and she a husband. They were like two migrating birds. I mean, that's when I think of Laponius, I think of us as just two migrating birds, just soaring along the information highway, male and female. I'm the male. And we were like two migrating birds who've been caught, and we've been forced to live in separate cages. They had forgiven each other what they had been ashamed of in the past. They forgave each other everything in their present, and they felt that this love of theirs had changed them both. I don't know about you, but that's exactly how I feel about this show. I feel like the love that we share, it has changed us both. I've been able to let go of so much shame, like so much embarrassment, like so much failure and humiliation. And I've made some mistakes. I've said some inappropriate things. I've been a little aggressive at times when I should have been more gentlemanly. But now I can just let that go, and I can celebrate the authentic thing that we got going here, our thing, our Cosa Nostra. So I look at the other shows at times, and I look at the other pundits at times, and there's such a gulf between myself and everyone else who opines on the news, because I try to understand the news in the overwhelming fullness of its individuality and idiosyncrasy. Okay? I'm not going to have the easy time of it that the pundits do with their schematic methods. Okay? So I can feel discouraged and guilt-ridden and depressed and lost and confused, and just absolutely deluged by the quantity of data, all its ambiguity and complexity. And I'm glad to suffer for your sake pain, indigestion, headache, fatigue, all the afflictions that the flesh is heir to, because of the guilt that I feel when I don't understand the data. And this isn't even to speak of the other kind of guilt that I may feel over the pain and frustration that other people in the world are so. I know you're wounded, right? And I got to keep picking away at the scab that you keep trying to form between yourself and me, try to cover over your psychic wounds, right? It's called resistance, right? And I'm just not going to let you do it, right? So I'm going to keep picking away at the scab. I'm going to keep the surface raw so that the wound will heal properly. I mean, that's what's going on here. So I'm using Janet Malcolm's book here on psychoanalysis, the impossible profession, and just twisting it for my own uses. So it talks about Otto Kernberg, a pioneering, famous psychoanalyst, and the protagonist of this book says when Kernberg talks about a patient, he talks as if he understood him inside and out, backwards and forwards, with relatively little effort, and he's just dazzling. And that's how I think about the more successful vloggers. They talk about subjects as though they know these subjects inside and out, backwards and forwards, with relatively little effort, and they're just dazzling, right? They're dazzling. They sound brilliant. They're impressive and utterly unconvincing. So here on this show, we try to understand the news and philosophy and God and religion and right and wrong in the overwhelming fullness of its individuality and idiosyncrasy. All right? Because we don't feel good when we don't understand the data. I feel better now. Whoa. Who says I'm muted? I think I'm back. Who says I'm muted? Come on, man. Come on, man. So I've been reading a book, We Are Bellingcat. Jesus. Sorry, Jesus. Finding Truth in a Post-Truth World. Elliot Higgins, TEDx in Amsterdam.
I originally was going to come here and talk to you about a revolution, but with the discussion of the post-truth world, it feels like a counter-revolution now. And it's been a very peaceful and quiet revolution. thanks to smartphones, thanks to social media, and thanks to the vast amount of information now available online to anyone. And this revolution has allowed a new field to grow. And I like to call this field online open source investigation. And we can use it to influence the powerful, we can use it to challenge the powerful, and we can bring them to accountability as well. Now, I started Bellingcat 2 years ago because I wanted to teach people how to do this. And the word Bellingcat comes from an old fable. It's a fable about a group of mice who were very frightened of a large and dangerous cat. So they got together and they had a meeting, and they said, what are we going to do? And they came up with the idea that the cat should have a bell around its neck. But they didn't have a plan to actually get it on the cat's neck. So what we're doing at Bellingcat is we're teaching people how to bell the cat. So I'm going to explain to you how this works through a very long case study we did. We worked on this for over 2 years. It's the case of MH17. On July 17th, 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 departed not far from here, heading east. Several hours later, over eastern Ukraine, it was shot down. 298 people died, 193 Dutch citizens died on that plane. Some of you might know them, some of you may have known people affected by the tragedy. And on September 28th, 2016, the criminal investigation, the joint investigation team gave a press conference saying that a missile launcher had traveled from Russia to Ukraine, shot down MH17 and returned. But in that 2-year period between 2014 and that press conference, there were rumors, speculations, and attempts to distract from the truth. But at Bellingcat, we were looking at the evidence that was being shared online. There was a vast...
Okay, so 60 Minutes talked
60
about
Minutes
this story.
overtime.
How Bellingcat tracked a Russian missile system.
It was nearly 6 years ago that Malaysia Flight 17 left Amsterdam en route to Malaysia, but was shot down over Ukraine, apparently shot down by a Russian-built missile system. What we discovered is that during these nearly 6 years, there has been a painstaking investigation, and Dutch prosecutors are now ready to go to trial with the suspects that they believe are responsible.
We started with multiple scenarios in the beginning. One was it an accident that could be discarded quite quickly? The other one, was it an explosion from inside? And the last two, most importantly, was it air-to-air? Like, was it shot by a plane, or was it surface-to-air?
Some of the earliest evidence in this case was discovered by civilians who were looking for information, photographs, and videos on the internet, and they were being led by this gentleman by the name of Elliot Higgins. Higgins had just days before started what is essentially an online detective agency that he called Bellingcat. What Higgins discovered was that in this war zone of eastern Ukraine, there were a lot of people, average civilians, who were shooting videos and stills of military convoys going back and forth.
So this is one of the first videos that was shared online after MH17 was shot down, and it was shared claiming that this was a Buck missile launcher.
So there were quite a number of photographs of this particular missile system, which was on the bed of a flatbed truck. There was even a phone number on the side of the flatbed truck.
Very clearly a phone number on the same side of that vehicle.
This is a telephone number?
That's right, that's a telephone number. In fact, people call that number up and ask the owner, what's going on? Why is your truck in this photograph? And he said his vehicle yard had been taken over by separatists sometime earlier.
In addition...
Okay, so there's a book out that this guy has published. We are Bellingcat, and I've been reading it and really enjoying it. This guy just came out of nowhere, had no credentials, and just published this book, We Are Bellingcat, Global Crime, Online Sleuths, and the Bold Future of News. And it reads like a detective story. So he writes, when General Michael Flynn ran the Defense Intelligence Agency, he remarked that secret sources used to contribute 90% of valuable intelligence. After the arrival of social media, it was the opposite. 90% of worthy intelligence now comes from open sources available to all. Spy agencies have always gathered open source intelligence, poring over newspapers, listening to radio broadcasts, but they tended to disdain such material. They preferred the clandestine sources because these sources justified their immense budgets and influence. For the rest of us, there was a problem with secret intel. We had to trust those who controlled it. Public trust has been brittle since the Iraq War, when the US-led coalition justified invasion with claims about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction that proved unfounded. Social mistrust today has become a broader problem than just the masses doubting the elites. So who's that guy on Twitter? And he wrote a book, Martin Guri, I believe. He wrote a great book about the revolt of the masses, about how the explosion of information has destroyed the elite's stranglehold or monopoly on information and therefore influence and power. So we've now got this explosion of information, and so we're much more skeptical of the elites, and the elites have not adapted very well to this new world. So looking at the chat, 1-800 numbers on the side of military vehicles based. Laponius cuts through illusions very fast. I think Luke should focus on rescuing a fallen woman. Now that you've been fully vaccinated, will you be resuming the search for a wife? Yeah. Well, I don't refer to her so much as a wife, but a co-host in real life, like a YouTube co-host, but for real life. That's how I'm thinking about it. All right, we are Bellingcat, global crime, online sleuths, and the bold future of news. Come on, are you not interested in the bold future of news? So, citizens view other citizens today with deep suspicion. Each political tribe is inside its own information bubble. There is the temptation to consider oneself as a different grade of human from those who fall for deception and conspiracy theories, yet much of what each of us believes is just what someone else told us. That makes experts vital, but they are not sufficient anymore. Allowing truth to become a matter of group loyalty has been a disaster. Today, claims must be laid out for all to see. The Bellingcat method is that. Click the links, check our conclusions for yourself. So one reason that people have so much suspicion of the elites with regard to COVID-19 is they haven't commissioned any studies about the costs and the rewards of the various approaches to COVID-19. We don't know the average age of, say, COVID deaths in the United States. So if the average age was 52, that would be very different if the average age was 82. So Elliot says, after 9/11, my interest shifted. News was happening so fast, papers were so slow. A lot of people started blogging after 9/11. I wanted to know more. I discovered an online message board. So I think I met Robert on like those Usenet groups back in 1997, 1998. So Elliot met up on with Something Awful, the online message board. It was full of argument and insight on almost any topic imaginable. I gained a new obsession, current affairs. By 2011, the most compelling part of my day came each morning when I arrived far too early at the office. Alone at my computer, I scoured the internet for the latest updates on the Arab Spring. My niche was the detail. I never attempted to tell a complete story as news reporters strive to do. I unearthed nuggets that others might use. The simple ambition proved more important than I realized. An alternative media ecosystem was expanding in those days, with plenty of dubious websites misrepresenting videos and images to win political arguments. By contrast, I had no personal connection to the Arab Spring. I had no partisan views. I was just fascinated. I hungered for extra tidbits. Plenty circulated, but plenty were false. My focus became valid information. I cited all sources. I made it clear where information derived from. I always acknowledged the limits of my knowledge. Doesn't that sound like 40? Like I'm always citing sources, making it clear where information comes from, acknowledging the limits of my knowledge. This approach developed into what would become a guiding principle at Bellingcat. The response to information chaos is transparency. In addition to that, they were able to use geolocation, Google Maps, and things like that, so they could very precisely say the convoy was in this location on this day at that time.
Someone actually calculated the routes between the vehicle yard and that first video we saw, and then use Google Street View to basically drive down the road, the same route, until he managed to actually find a location that matched this place exactly.
One of the things that they can do if there's no time information in the photograph itself is they use shadows, like a sundial.
Based on your research, this image was taken when in relation to the timeline of the shoot down of MH17?
Well, in this case, we know exactly where the camera is positioned, and you can also see shadows that are clearly visible. And that allows us to use these shadows as a sundial. So we were able to establish that this photograph must have been taken between 12 and 1 o'clock.
And by chaining together all of these photographs and videos and the geolocation information, they were able to essentially draw the line of the convoy from a military base in Russia all the way to the firing position in eastern Ukraine.
Okay, so talking about this new book, We Are Bellingcat. So the public was beginning to hear of online sleuthing around this time, 2012, but what they learned was not always great. Shortly before my trip to Italy, the Boston bombings took place when two terrorists detonated explosives near the marathon finishing line on 15th of April 2013, killing 3 people, wounding hundreds. Users of Reddit sought to solve the case, and they botched it. They mistakenly circulated false claims that various dark-skinned men with backpacks were guilty. So a lot of crowdsourcing of information is just terrible. That's why on this show we cut through the nonsense, we cut through the BS, and we get down to the shining pearl of truth. This was termed digilantism, a reckless version of open source investigation where scaremongering masqueraded as detective work. So there's diddling, there's digital penetration, there's digilantism, and then there's just full-bore social intercourse, which is what we've got going on here. We're not just diddling each other. There's no digital penetration on this show. This is just full-bore, open-hearted social intercourse in pursuit of the truth. No digilantism, no diddling, no digital penetration, all right? No one's putting their thumb up anyone else on this show. This is a safe space, all right? You are in the square of trust right now. Others wondered if open source investigation was what WikiLeaks did. Absolutely not. WikiLeaks was about leaking classified information. Open source investigators analyze what sits in the public. So we're not leaking classified information here. We're just patriots pursuing the truth. Secrecy of WikiLeaks placed vast power into its hands. At best, I consider WikiLeaks a potential source among many that I would need to cross-reference. So by the summer of 2013, the open source investigative community amounted to a loose grouping that had formed organically, just like this community. We're just a loose grouping. We formed organically, dedicated to the pursuit of truth and radical love and inclusion. So among us, a spirit of cooperation rules, even friendship. And the advantage of this approach is that you never have to worry that a bad actor might infiltrate our project. So if someone materializes with startling new claims of astonishing evidence, we don't just blindly accept that. Like, we evaluate their research on its merits. We check the personal data trail that an individual has left online, or at least this is what Bellingcat does. I couldn't be bothered, to ensure that nothing was awry. Question of who can join touches on a key principle. At Bellingcat, we care only what you can find, what you can substantiate, and what you can lay out for all to see. So dissident groups have problems with bad actors infiltrating. But at Bellingcat, all they care about is what you can find, what you can substantiate, what you can lay out for all to see. So identify, verify, amplify. So identify issues overlooked and discoverable online, verify all evidence, never engage in speculation. Does that not sound like this show? We never engage in wild speculation. And we amplify what we learn, and we amplify the field as a whole. So, I mean, you amplify me, I amplify you, we all get together and we amplify. So this is Bellingcat. In the past, citizens heard governments lying. They had little recourse. There was nothing they could do about it. Events on the news happened so far outside our control. This is not the case anymore. Nothing stirs the online investigative community like fabrications from the powerful. When the powerful offer all sorts of contradictory narratives about an event, this is even useful because it provides us something concrete to verify or debunk. So online claims in the chat, they're nothing more than a hypothesis. They're validated only with supporting evidence that other people should be able to corroborate for themselves. It's akin to the scientific method applied to journalism. So you want a summary of this show? The show is simply the scientific method applied to journalism.
In Kursk, there's a missile brigade called the 53rd Air Defense Brigade, and we were able to establish for certain the missile launcher came from that particular brigade.
And Kursk is in Russia, and the 53rd Brigade is a Russian military unit.
Yes, and it was probably very likely crewed by Russian crew.
The Russians have created any number of stories about what might have happened to Malaysia Flight 17. They suggested that it was shot down by a Ukrainian Air Force plane. They suggested that it was shot down by a Russian system that was in possession of the Ukrainian military.
They focused first of all on satellite imagery of a Ukrainian missile base where there was a Buk missile launcher parked, which then moved. But we reviewed those satellite images and we could show that they were actually old photoshopped images. They claimed the video filmed in Luhansk, which was filmed on July 18th, showing the missile launcher, was filmed in another city. But it wasn't. We could show that the details in this video matched perfectly to one specific location in Luhansk, not the location they claimed it was.
One of the things that's on the cutting edge of the investigation now is some of these telephone intercepts that Ukrainian intelligence recorded and has supplied to the investigators.
You released some of the communication intercepts that mention the Russian defense minister, the deputy director of Russian intelligence, and an aide to President Putin. Are you suggesting that those people are involved or had knowledge of this?
Well, we are not just suggesting anything at this moment. We were doing a call for witnesses, and what we want to know is...
Okay, so Bellingcat, I really enjoyed this new book. All right, so there are all sorts of bogus conspiracy thinking going on out there, and we're just gonna debunk this. All right, this is how huge conspiracy thinking is these days.
The amount of information being shared online, some of it was hidden, some of it was quite easy to find. So I'm going to take you through an example of how we use this information. So this is a photograph that was posted online on July 17th, 2014, after MH17 had been shot down. Now, what we can see here is a Buk missile launcher on a truck traveling through a town. The question was, can we find out exactly where this was taken? And we can, in fact. We use something called geolocation. Now, with geolocation, we look at the details in the image and we see if there's anything that's available that can tell us where this was taken. So, in this case, there's a clue in this picture. There's the name of a shop. Now, we knew there was only so many shops in the world that's going to have the same name. Unfortunately, in this case, it's not many, and not many in eastern Ukraine.
Okay, so guys, are you even aware of the tremendous threat that conspiracy thinking poses to science-based medicine? Have you even thought about that? There's so much anti-vaccine hysteria going around, and this is where we just punch holes in hysterical conspiracy-type thinking so that we can arrive at the truth, right? So here's some of the conspiracies that widely believed. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act alone in assassinating JFK. Apparently 47% of US adults believe this. There's a deep state working against President Donald Trump and his supporters. That's ridiculous, 29%. The government is hiding aliens in Area 51, 27%. 9/11 was an inside job. Climate change is a hoax. The Illuminati secretly control the world. The government is using chemicals to control the population through chemtrails, and the moon landing was faked. All right? So anything that threatens science, guys, is a threat to science-based medicine. Right? And these threats can come in many forms. They include pseudoscience, which is science that is distorted and biased to produce desired outcomes rather than true outcomes. There's anti-science, attempts at undermining or even replacing science as a method for figuring stuff out. And then there is science denial, which is perverting skepticism to deny established science. Right, this is an article on sciencebasedmedicine.org. I believe this is written by Stephen Novella. I think this website is overseen or was overseen by surgeon, so PhD and an MD, David Gorski. All right, real sciencey dude. Now, there's one thing that underlies and reinforces all three of these threats to science, and it seems to be growing in power and influence. So I think we can combat it together. It's called conspiracy thinking. Right? And conspiracy thinking does not refer to the notion that conspiracies exist, for certainly they do. Conspiracy thinking, as it's popularly used, connotes belief in grand conspiracies, conspiracies so large that it require hundreds or thousands of people working across institutions, nations, perhaps even generations to create not just a lie, but a false reality. So grand conspiracies are inherently implausible. As the larger they become, the more quickly they would be revealed, eventually becoming mathematically impossible. So grand conspiracies tend to collapse in on themselves. Grand conspiracies are not new. The anti-vaccine movement has always been based on the big conspiracy that the government, many governments, the medical establishment, hospitals, universities, professional organizations, big pharma, all right, they're all working together to promote the lie that vaccines are safe and effective. So the anti-vaccine grand conspiracy gets more implausible the more you think about it. Problem with conspiracy theories is that they need to get bigger and deeper to cover their tracks. So conspiracy thinking is a positive feedback loop, and it is for losers. You don't want to be a loser, right? Be a winner. So conspiracy thinking is a positive feedback loop. It leads to grander and grander conspiracies. Now, for vaccines, you might ask, well, why hasn't any intrepid reporter broken this story about how dangerous they are? Well, because all the reporters, they're in on it. So the conspiracy must simultaneously be both massive and airtight, which is logically absurd. The medical establishment must have engineered the illusion that vaccines have significantly reduced many diseases, then tricked millions of healthcare experts into joining the conspiracy. I had a friend comment yesterday that he believes that COVID-19 was just something that was developed by Big Pharma so that they could sell vaccines. And now this vaccine conspiracy is so far-reaching, it controls every single government in the world. None of them have broken away from its grip. Now, this is ludicrous, right? The anti-vaccine case is absurd. Grand conspiracy narrative relies upon an implausible and cynical view of humanity. People are divided into three stark groups. There are the conspirators, who are simultaneously brilliant, yet absurdly stupid, since they can engineer an unbelievably complex conspiracy, but always reveal themselves in silly ways. Then there are the enlightened members of the Army of Light who see the conspiracy for what it is, and they are on a mission to save the world. And then everyone else, the sheeple, they cannot see the conspiracy. They just remain its victims. Now, the psychological appeal of being among the enlightened few, that's easy. Why people like that.
We put in the name of the towns it could be in, we put in the name of the shop, and the first result was actually a wiki someone had created with every street of every town in eastern Ukraine with the shops on them. So we had the name of the street, we had the name of the shop. We put that in. That gave us a court document where there'd actually been a fight in the shop.
And my good friend says that the Manhattan Project was both massive and airtight. Well, it was not airtight. The Russians, there were various scientists who turned over the information to the Soviet Union. So no, it was not. It's not airtight, bro.
And it gave the full address of the shop. Now, we searched for that address and came up with something very interesting. So I'm going to show you a brief video, and just hold in your mind this yellow shop hoarding, and also this building with these black and white stripes down the side of it. Because as we were searching, we found this video. This person has an interesting hobby where he drives around eastern Ukraine filming videos on his dash camera, putting them online. And it just happened he had driven past the same spot in the photograph. On the left-hand side, you can see that black and white striped building. On the right-hand side, the yellow shop hoarding. And that confirmed for us the exact location of this shop. We had a view from a video of the same photograph that had been taken earlier. And there were other clues in there as well. We weren't just interested in where it was taken, but when. So how do we know when this was taken? Well, by the shadows. The shadows are a sundial that we can use to tell the time this was taken. And this was taken around midday on July 17th, 2014.
Okay, so Bellingcat is science applied to journalism. The 40 show, this is science applied to journalism. Right, back to this article on sciencebasedmedicine.org. Conspiracy thinking is anathema to science. It turns the rules of evidence on its head. The world of grand conspiracies, a lack of evidence is simply evidence that there's been a cover-up. No evidence is evidence for the conspiracy. Right? I mean, just when you think you've seen the pinnacle of conspiracy absurdity, new ground is always being broken. So anyone who even defends science-based medicine now is in on the conspiracy. I mean, there are all these people who believe in the flat earth. All right? And the flat earth conspiracy paved the way for QAnon, which claim the Democratic Party is filled with devil-worshipping pedophiles and that Donald Trump is going to expose them and bring them to justice. So QAnon started with this core claim, but then it metastasized into an all-purpose right-wing grand conspiracy, including anti-vaccine views and views that voter fraud determined the 2020 election. All right, so David Gorski is a surgeon. And he writes here, science denial is a form of conspiracy thinking. So what is a conspiracy theory? The central conspiracy theory of the anti-vaccine movement is that vaccines are dangerous and ineffective. So they're both dangerous and they're ineffective. Now, who are the they hiding the evidence of the harm from vaccine and the ineffectiveness? Well, obviously they is the CDC, the FDA, Big Pharma, the medical profession, the press, pretty much everyone else outside of the select small group of those who are enlightened and thus privy to this hidden knowledge. So right after COVID-19 hit, anti-vaxxers made very common cause with COVID-19 deniers who made common cause with, voter fraud conspiracy thinkers. So QAnon is like the conspiracy theory for the age of Donald Trump. It's incredibly adaptable. It's very much akin to the old Jewish blood libel conspiracy theory. It's been rebranded and revamped for the Facebook century with more than a dash of the satanic panic of the 1990s. So at its heart, QAnon claims that there's a secret cabal of Satan worshippers who are also pedophiles who secretly rule the world behind the scenes from positions of power in the government, banks, news media, entertainment industry, and church. And they're cannibals. They love killing children for their blood. Now, there's a story I read. And believe me, this story is apocryphal, but it's just a story about art. So the artist Benvenuto Cellini was casting a statue, and he needed some calcium for his bronze alloy. He couldn't find any in his studio, so he picked up this little boy and threw him into the pot for the calcium in his bones, because what was the life of a little boy to the claims of art? So there's this psychoanalyst, and a new woman patient walks in for a first session, and he asks her to take off her clothes and to lie down on the couch, and she obeys him. And then he climbs on top of her, does what he needs to do. Then he gets off her. He goes back to his chair. He tells her to put her clothes on, to take a seat. And he says to her, well, we solved my problem. Now, what's your problem? Immune system is 100% effective if you're healthy. Is it really? Come on, Laponius. Is that science-based? Now, with psychoanalysis and with medicine, right, when you're dealing with the healthy, right, you're going to have much more success than when you're dealing with the less healthy. So when should psychoanalysis end? When the patient resolves his transference neurosis, when he finally accepts the fact that the analyst is not going to fulfill the wishes the patient had as a child toward his parents, that it just isn't going to happen that way, that he must renounce these wishes toward the analyst and then fulfill them in his own life, in his work, in his attachments, and through his children, that he as an adult must put away childish things, which is horribly painful. So you probably come to this show, you start watching every day, and you start thinking, oh, 40 is going to fulfill all my all my wishes that I've had since childhood that my parents would grant me. 40 is going to grant them. But then you keep watching the show and you realize that you're going to have to go out there into the world and fulfill your own wishes. So you probably come to the show, you watch a little bit, and you think, oh, I'm on 40's show. Now finally, I'm going to get admitted into the parental bedroom. Like maybe 40 will leave his cam on in his bedroom when things get spicy and interesting. And so then I'm going to get to watch 40 in his bedroom doing his thing, making Apricot Sky come real in high definition. And I'm going to be treated to the secrets of the 40 love machine. And finally, I'm going to find out what 40 does in there. And then I'm going to be able to form alliances with people in 40's bedroom. Look, don't judge yourself for having these feelings, these fantasies, all right? It's perfectly natural, all right? It's just transference, all right? That's what you're feeling. Come to this show and you're feeling transference because we all invent each other according to our early blueprints. So we have these fantasies and we have this imprinting from childhood and we have to kind of grope around for each other through this dense thicket of absent others. Like we see other people through the pain and the joys of our previous life experience. So this horrible kind of predestination hovers over each new attachment we form. That's Janet Malcolm in this great 1982 book, Psychoanalysis, The Impossible Profession. So I want you to understand that your love for me is just a normal part of the treatment we've got going on in here. Like, you need to accept that falling in love with me is just inescapable fate. It's not real. It's hallucinatory. It's just an artificial revival of early feelings that have nothing to do with 40. But then isn't all love like that? What we mean by falling in love is a kind of sickness and craziness. It's an illusion, according to Freud. It's a blindness to what the love person is really like. It's a state arising from infantile origins. So don't feel bad about your infantile origins. We all have them. The only difference between transference love and genuine love is the context, right? So in this context, nothing is permitted to come of your love for me. This is a situation of renunciation, all right? You've renounced the pleasure principle. I've renounced the pleasure principle. Why? Because we each have a higher goal, right? For me, I've got the sake of my professional vlogger ethics and my love of scientific progress to which I'm dedicated. Now you, by renouncing the pleasure principle, all right, what do you get out of it? You get to acquire extra mental freedom. You learn to distinguish conscious mental activity from the unconscious. Right? So it's perfectly normal and natural that you want to like see into 40's bedroom and start making alliances in my bedroom. So don't judge yourself for that. So if you're watching this show, you've probably never felt in anywhere. Not in school, not in college, not in medical school, not in psychiatric training, not in relationship to other psychoanalysts. Right? So you come to this show because you have this fantasy that, you know, at core, you're a peeping Tom, right? You're an outsider looking into my bedroom and you're feeling excited and you're feeling scared and you're probably getting aroused and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on, but you don't have to get involved because it's just through the internet and you're not having to risk anything. Like, so at least you're not like a real peeping Tom, right? But instead you're like a scientist, right? You're like someone who gets to know other people intimately without getting actually involved with them. And then you may very well be Jewish, another kind of outsider. So you come to this show because you are filled with fantasies about what goes on in the Kadosh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum. And I hate to tell you this, but many of your fantasies about what goes on in this inner sanctum, many of them just aren't true. And the inner sanctum and the outer sanctum and the courtyard where the goyim can be and the places where the goyim can't be, this hierarchy, this infantilization, it exists throughout life, right? It's not just a function of the 40 show. It's in the law, it's in business, it's in church, it's in science, it's in education, right? There are edipally significant positions in every profession. So press 1 if you want to kill your father. Press 2 if you want to sleep with your mother. Press 12 if you want to do both, right? So when you're dealing with hierarchy and infantilization, all right, you're always going to be dealing with crises that infantilize you and cause, grown men to squabble like kids about trivial things. You can't deny your infantile wishes because the sources of motivation and pleasure come from infantile wishes. So in both psychoanalysis and on the 40 show and in life, we perceive reality through a veil of unconscious infantile fantasy. Like nothing we ever say or do is purely rational or irrational, real or transference. It's always a mixture. So the difference between this show and psychotherapy and life is that here in this artificial, extreme, bizarre, stressful, in some ways awful situation, your infantile fantasies come into higher relief than they do in real life. They finally become accessible to study as they do not in life. So I'm not here to instruct you on the nature of reality. I'm here to acquaint you with you. I'm here to introduce you to your best self, to your child within, to your, your wounded inner child in all its infantility and its impossible and unrepudiated and unrepudiatable longings and wishes. So terms like real relationship and therapeutic alliance and working alliance, they simply obscure and dilute and trivialize the radical nature of what we're doing here. Okay, the chat says, if this were a real pandemic, instead of billboards with mass propaganda, there would be billboards telling the masses to lose weight, pictograms of food high in vitamin D and zinc. Ashley says, I'm going to signal how much of an obedient, high IQ, morally virtuous person I am by getting 75 vaccine shots. Elliot Blatt wants to watch 40 Stampede to the Clitoris. I often fantasized that if I could go back in time, 40 would cast me in the lead role in Apricot Sky. Look, are you following in the footsteps of J.F. Garapi? If you're already a bit crazy, this show will push you over the edge. Look forward casting his pearls of wisdom before the world. It's the Pfizer vaccine. It's making him nuts. So epic. Ashley's got some epic timestamps, so throw them down in the chat. Ed Dutton said on his live stream with Tom Sunic that the right wing should view left wingers as genetic mutants that are not human. Laponia says, no, bro, I'm perfectly normal. The show is fun for me at the end of the day. So you're not really a peeping Tom? Is that really what you want us to believe, bro? I mean, I don't judge. This is where you can be your true self.
I will now discuss something that is a big problem. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is going to be mostly an American-centric
I got to get my
talk,
clothes out of the dryer.
But people say, talk about what you know about, right? And if I don't know nearly as much about Europe or the UK as I do about my own country. So let's get going. Any of you familiar with this story that came out in the news about a month ago? 4 weeks ago tomorrow, actually. It's basically, University of California, Irvine, or UCI, got a huge gift from Susan and Henry Samueli, who I'll tell you who they are in a minute. The idea, the purpose was to produce a first-of-its-kind integrative medicine, integrative health program, and bringing these 4 schools all under the same umbrella of the Susan Samueli College of Health Sciences. So, medicine, nursing, pharmacy, population health. That covers most of it. And the existing Susan Samueli Center for Integrative Medicine is to become the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. So, who are they? They're a big force in promoting what I like to call the integration of quackery into medicine. Henry Samueli is a billionaire. He was a co-founder of Broadcom. Susan was a software programmer at IBM who became interested in integrative health when she went on a vacation in France and had a cold, took a homeopathic remedy, got better, and decided that she was very much into this. And they're both believers now. In fact, just read that quote for a second. And it's true, and she's a homeopath, he's a billionaire. What could go wrong? So, what was interesting about this story was after the first couple of days, we started to see stories like this. Does $200 million quack? Well, the answer is yes, very loudly. But and then you'd see another story like facing criticism. UC Irvine scrubs homeopathy from its roster of offered treatments, and it's true. They started deleting pages with references to homeopathy from their websites. They didn't get them all. The internet is forever, and this caught one journalist's notice. But homeopathy has been with UCI for a long time. The Samuelis have been giving UCI a lot of money for a long time to promote integrative medicine. And although they generally don't say a lot about what's there, in 2003 they kind of made a mistake. They said they want to study the efficacy of various modalities considered to be part of complementary and alternative medicine, including herbs and homeopathic medicine. This is the only time in a gift agreement that this term was ever included. But I do like this. This is like 5 years or 4.5 years before science-based medicine ever came into existence. And they say they want this to serve as a source of science-based information for medical professionals. Now, I debated whether to put this slide in here because you all know what homeopathy is, right? Or most of you do. But I feel it's obligatory in case there are any people here who aren't familiar with it. So the 2 laws of homeopathy, the law of similars, like cures like. To cure a symptom, you use something that causes that symptom. And then the law of infinitesimals, which says that diluting things makes them stronger. And you go through the numbers. A typical homeopathic dilution is a multiple of 1C, which is 1 to 100. And if you go through it, 6C is about 10 to the 12th. 12C, about 10 to the 24th. And all of you know, and Avogadro's number, as you know, is the number of molecules in a mole. And if you start diluting things beyond about 10 to the 23, you're highly unlikely to have any remaining compound. And of course, if you look at the 100C dilution there, which they do exist, but 30C is more typical, is way more than 10 to the 23rd. And of course, the number of atoms in the known universe is only estimated to be.
Oh man, so I was just getting my laundry, and who would I run into but my 19-year-old neighbor? She's just a big fan of the show. She was just dressed in lingerie, and she puts her hand on my chest, and she says, 40, I could make you very, very happy. And I said, well, nothing makes me happier than arguing the case for science-based medicine and dispelling grand conspiracy theories. So I must get back to my show. And so I try not to think about her, like what use do I have for lust. But I know what's going on for you, your core. You're a peeping Tom. And you might say, oh no, I'm normal. I'm not a peeping Tom. And that's called resistance. Right? So any time where you don't accept what I'm saying, that's just evidence that you're suffering from resistance, bro. And that's what we're going to overcome through this work. Okay, you want me to play Jared Taylor? Really? When I could talk to you about resistance? I'm here to help you overcome resistance, bro. Then you want to overcome resistance? This show is more emotionally manipulative than mainstream media. What's your country, Dr. Gorski? He's an American. He's a patriot, bro. Right, so, look, I'm here to help you overcome your resistance. And so, you are a peeping Tom. But don't beat yourself down for that, all right? And there's no sense resisting things I'm saying. Right, so... Look, a clitoral orgasm may be accompanied by feelings in the vagina, and thus, properly speaking, a clitoral orgasm can be called a vaginal orgasm. So the protagonist in this Janet Malcolm book on psychoanalysis says, I did a hatchet job on Otto Kernberg. I'd done my homework. I crushed him. Everyone knew I had. After that, I became socially acceptable. People who dismissed me as a computer nut started being nice to me. All kinds of people started noticing me and inviting me to parties. So the small edge that psychoanalysts have, they can exercise in only one situation in life, the analytic situation. So in this unnatural, artificial, stressful situation, the analyst's small advantage of self-knowledge and self-control comes into play. But when you take the psychoanalyst out of his consultation room, his advantages recede, becomes just like everyone else. He begins to act just like other people. So you might think, this is ironic, you would think, does not the psychoanalyst work with his patients? Does not 40 work with his viewers to help you to behave more rationally and reflectively? But this isn't helping you to behave more rationally and effectively. That isn't what we're really doing here. That's a myth about what goes on in the 40 show. So many people say, oh, the 40 show is about helping people to behave more rationally and reflectively. That it's helping people think more clearly, that it helps people become more wise and more good. All right, but what we're doing here is not primarily intellectual. It isn't primarily moral. It's not primarily education. What we're doing here is soul surgery. We're rearranging things inside your soul, the way that surgery rearranges things inside the body, or the way that an automobile mechanic rearranges things under the hood of the car. It's that impersonal and radical. Right? So, yeah, you'll have a little bit more personal freedom. All right? So you can think, oh, I'm going to watch the 40 show, and I'm going to cross the bridge to total freedom. So I understand that's your expectation. Watch the 40 show, cross the bridge to total freedom. And it's a very compelling line, but